The sovereign individual got the laptop. The enterprise got the audit trail. And that may be the most uncomfortable part of enterprise AI right now. For years, the promise of digital technology was exit. Leave the office and live in Lisbon. Leave the local job market, but work for New York. Leave the geography that priced you out or pinned you down, but use software hosted somewhere else entirely. And now with AI, that dream looks even stronger. One person can draft a proposal, analyze a market, write code, summarize a contract, build a slide deck, translate a message, and prepare for a client meeting before lunch. That used to require a team. Now it requires a laptop, a login, and possibly too much confidence. That is why the sovereign individual still feels relevant. The book was published in 1997. Its big idea was that the shift from industrial society to information society would change the balance of power between individuals and institutions. Technology would lower the cost of exit. Talent, capital, and knowledge would become more mobile. Large institutions would lose leverage as productive people found ways to work, transact, and coordinate outside traditional boundaries. And to be fair, a lot of that happened. Remote work weakened the office. Cloud software weakened geography. Digital platforms created global markets. Crypto challenged the state's monopoly over money. And AI seems to push the pattern even further. At the edge, the individual looks more sovereign than ever. But that is only half the story. Because the world around us and the world around that individual is becoming less open, less stable, and less forgiving. Chips are not just chips anymore. They are strategic assets. The US and China are fighting over advanced semiconductor access, chip-making equipment, and building frontier AI systems. Data centers are not just buildings anymore. They are power, grid, and infrastructure fights. AI regulation is not abstract anymore. The EU AI Act targets high-risk uses such as health, creditworthiness, law enforcement, biometric identification, and critical services. So yes, the worker sees a prompt box, but the enterprise is operating inside a world of export controls, data rules, grid constraints, AI regulation, cybersecurity pressure, and national security politics. That is what the sovereign individual missed about AI. The individual may be able to access intelligence from almost anywhere, but the institution cannot govern intelligence from nowhere. And that is where personal AI stops being personal. I'm Vlad Stoyanovsky, and this is the Sovereign AI Enterprise. This channel is about what happens when AI stops being a productivity trick and starts becoming part of how institutions operate. In the first video, I talked about the boring version of enterprise AI failure, the quiet workflow decision no one can explain afterward. This video is about the step before that, how AI gains authority through ordinary work. The prompt box looks harmless. That is exactly why it spreads. A small rectangle, a blinking cursor, a private request in the middle of the workday. Summarize this, rewrite that. Turn these notes into a recommendation. Nothing about that feels like a corporate event. There is no intake form, no architecture review, no one from legal or risk sitting next to the worker saying, before you paste that paragraph, let's convene the AI Governance Council, which is actually a good thing. But that is also why AI spreads so easily. It enters the enterprise through ordinary work, a pasted paragraph, a generated slide, a code suggestion, a contract note. Then the origin disappears. The paragraph becomes part of the proposal. The proposal shapes the meeting. The meeting shapes the forecast. By then, no one is asking where the first draft came from. The output has hardened into the record. And once it enters the record, it can start moving the workflow. The prompt box may be personal, but the record is not. The workflow is definitely not. And that is the danger. AI output does not need to be wrong to become dangerous. That is the part enterprises keep underestimating. It only needs to be useful enough that people stop asking where it came from. AI is very good at that. It makes rough thinking look polished. It makes thin evidence sound complete. It makes uncertainty read like confidence. It turns fragments into fluent paragraphs. It removes the visible seams. A bad spreadsheet often looks like a bad spreadsheet. A weak argument may still show its bruises, but AI can sand down the rough edges. It can make half-formed work look institution-ready before the institution has earned the conclusion. The danger is not always hallucination. Sometimes it is premature confidence. And that is how a private AI output becomes an official artifact. And once it enters a proposal, a repository, a case file, a client note, a contract review, or a workflow, it stops being a private shortcut. And so does the risk. In other words, the most important moment in enterprise AI usually looks like nothing. No one announces it. No one changes the job description. No one says, this model now has authority. A person simply relies on the output. That is the hidden promotion. A tool that was supposed to help prepare the work starts shaping the work, and the output becomes trusted before anyone decides whether it deserves trust. Then, the generated answer becomes easier to forward than to question. I know Vlad, I trust Vlad, and so if Vlad forwards me something, I'll trust it without asking whether it was AI generated. The authority does not come from the model. AI gets promoted when people start treating its output as judgment. The wrong enterprise AI question is, are people using AI? Because they are, and in most cases, they should be. The next wrong question is, which tool are they using? Better, but not enough. A good question is, where does AI gain authority? Where does a draft become a recommendation? Where does a recommendation become a workflow? Where does a workflow become a decision? And who notices when that line is crossed? Because AI use is too blunt a category. A private draft and the decision the organization has to defend are not the same problem. This is why the phrase AI use is meaningless. Do not govern AI by asking where it was used. govern it by asking what authority it carried. This is why not every AI use deserves the same alarm, because AI may have helped with a private draft, or it may have shaped a decision the organization will later have to defend. Those are not variations of the same problem. Rather, they are different forms of institutional exposure. And this is where human in the loop can become a dangerous comfort. It sounds like control, but it often only means proximity. Because a person saw the answer, they clicked approve and were nominally responsible. But if that person did not understand what the system omitted, compressed, invented, or overweighted, then the human was not truly governing the output. I propose that there are 4 thresholds. Threshold 1 is assistance. AI helps one person prepare. It rewrites a paragraph, summarizes background, explains a topic, sharpens an argument, or turns rough notes into something usable. The work may improve, but it has not yet become the company's position. The risk is basic: poor judgment, sensitive data in the wrong place, or polished language mistaken for truth. Threshold 2 is shared work. AI output enters something other people rely on: a proposal, a sales plan, a project document, a repository, a case file, or a client record. Now, the origin starts to fade. People who never saw the prompt start treating the output as settled work. The risk is no longer only carelessness, it is unmarked influence. Then there is threshold 3, process movement. AI changes what happens next. It routes a case, escalates an issue, updates a record, invokes a tool, suppresses an exception. At this threshold, AI is not just helping people produce work. It is moving the business. The risk is operational drift. Work starts flowing through a path no one fully owns, monitors, or can quickly reverse. Finally, there is threshold 4, institutional decision. AI influences an outcome the organization may have to defend: credit, hiring, fraud, claims, procurement, compliance, medical prioritization, public benefits, regulated client outcomes. At this level, speed is secondary. The organization needs evidence. It needs an explanation. It needs appeal. It needs override. It needs accountability. The risk is authority without proof. So what should enterprises actually do? Start with the work, not the model. Most enterprises will not lose control of AI because they picked the wrong model. They will lose control because they never decided what the model was allowed to do. Do not start with the vendor demo. Do not start with the feature list. Do not start with a generic acceptable use policy that treats every prompt as either safe or dangerous. Start with the work. Look at where AI is already showing up, then mark the threshold. Start with the artifacts: proposals, case notes, code commits, support summaries, CRM updates, compliance reviews, workflow triggers, decision recommendations. Those are the places where AI moves from private assistance into institutional work. Threshold 1. If AI is being used for assistance, keep the rules simple. Give people approved tools. Define what cannot be pasted into them. Make the data boundary obvious. Public information, internal information, confidential information, regulated information, client-sensitive information. Workers need clear lines before they need abstract principles. Threshold 2. If AI enters shared work, require traceability. A proposal, case note, code change, or client recommendation should not become official just because the language sounds finished. Important outputs should carry sources, assumptions, and a review owner. Someone needs to know what was AI assisted, what was checked, and what evidence supports it. Threshold 3. If AI moves a business process, register it as a governed use case before it goes live. Assign a business owner, not just a technology owner. Define what the system is allowed to change. Define what it is not allowed to change. And define who can stop it. Process-moving AI needs monitoring, fallback, escalation, and a way to unwind the wrong action before it becomes operational fact. And threshold 4. If AI influences an institutional decision, slow down. This is where convenience becomes dangerous. The organization needs an audit trail, an explanation standard, a way to challenge the outcome, override authority, and evidence that the system was tested against the harms that matter. A human reviewer is not enough if that person cannot see why the recommendation was made or does not have the authority to reject it, especially if it's a use case the enterprise never classified. Now, this is not a call for bureaucracy. It is a call to put AI where it belongs, to keep it out of places where the institution cannot explain it, to raise the control level when the output moves closer to authority, and to lower the control level when the use is genuinely low risk. Enterprises can't ban tools people use anyway, and they also can't let AI drift into official work with no record, no owner, and no way back. So the rule is simple. Do not govern AI by the tool alone. Govern it by the work it is allowed to change, the authority it is allowed to carry, and the evidence the institution would need if challenged. Because the sovereign individual was right to see technology as a force for exit. But exit was only half the story. The other half is what happens when the work comes back inside the institution. So while the individual may start with access, the institution must end with accountability. If enterprises get this right, AI can make people more capable without making the organization blind. But if they get it wrong, they will not simply have AI risk. They will have institutional action without institutional memory. A recommendation no one can trace. A process no one owns. A decision no one can explain. That is what the sovereign individual missed about AI. The future is not only about who can leave the old system. It's about whether the systems left behind can still account for what is done in their name. So here's the question I would leave every enterprise leader with. Where does AI stop helping your organization think and start helping it act? That is the line that matters. Not the prompt, not the tool, the authority. If you can name that line, you are building control. If you cannot, AI is already moving faster than your operating model. I wrote the full essay behind this on the Sovereign AI Enterprise Substack. Link is in the description. That is where I'm digging into the operating model behind AI. What gets used, what gets trusted, what gets governed, and what eventually has to be defended. Subscribe and follow below if you want AI conversation with less hype and more enterprise reality.
The data flows, a constant stream, shaping futures, chasing every dream. complex patterns in sights unseen. A new era, sharp and keen. The world is changing, can you feel the pulse? A deeper vision beyond every impulse. Enterprise, geopolitics, AI.